Jackson Callahan never cared much for rules. He valued his freedom, his space, and above all, the right to live without anyone breathing down his neck, dictating how he should maintain his own property. After years of grueling work as an independent contractor, he finally secured his dream, a 10-acre property in rural Texas. It was far enough from the city to enjoy peace and quiet, yet close enough to modern conveniences. The house was a charming, old farmhouse, aged but well-maintained, with a large garage, a fully equipped workshop, and enough land to ensure that no neighbor could ever bother him. For the first few months, life was exactly how he'd envisioned it. His mornings began on the front porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over his land. Afternoons were spent tinkering in the workshop or fixing up the old barn. No HOA, no prying eyes, just the way he liked it. His property was legally distinct from the neighboring housing development, Willow Creek Estates, a pristine neighborhood filled with nearly identical houses, meticulously manicured lawns, and the ever-looming presence of a strict homeowners association, HOA. Jackson had zero interest in their cookie-cutter lifestyle and assumed they'd have no interest in him. He couldn't have been more wrong. One evening, after a long day working under his truck, Jackson checked his mailbox and found an official-looking envelope. The emblem of the Willow Creek Estates, HOA, was stamped on the front. Frowning, he tore it open. "Dear Mr. Callahan, it has come to our attention that your property does not meet the standards of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. The following violations must be addressed immediately. Unauthorized structures. Your garage and workshop do not meet HOA aesthetic guidelines. Unapproved fencing. Your perimeter fence does not align with community regulations. Unkempt landscaping. Your property does not meet the required maintenance standards. You have 30 days to bring your property into compliance or face financial penalties. Failure to act may result in further enforcement actions. Sincerely, Margaret Evans, President, Willow Creek Estates, HOA." Jackson chuckled, shaking his head. "Compliance? I'm not even in their damn neighborhood." He crumpled the letter and tossed it in the trash, assuming it was a mistake. But 2 days later, a white SUV pulled into his driveway. Out stepped a woman in her early 50s, dressed in a tailored blazer, her platinum blonde hair cut in a precise bob. She walked with the kind of entitled confidence that immediately rubbed Jackson the wrong way. Wiping grease from his hands, he met her near the porch. "Mr. Callahan, I presume?" she asked, her voice sweet but laced with condescension. "That's me. And you are?" "Margaret Evans, President of the Willow Creek Estates, HOA. I trust you received our letter." "Yeah, I got it. I threw it away. My property isn't part of your HOA." Margaret's tight smile barely wavered. "That's where you're mistaken. Willow Creek's community expansion plan now includes your property. We have certain standards we maintain for the benefit of all homeowners, and I'm here to ensure you comply." Jackson laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Lady, I didn't sign up for your club, and I sure as hell didn't agree to your standards. This land's been here long before Willow Creek even existed." Margaret's smile thinned. "Legal matters can be flexible. I suggest you cooperate, Mr. Callahan. I'd hate for this to get messy." That was the moment Jackson realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a power play, and Margaret Evans wasn't used to losing. The next morning, Jackson spotted 2 men near his fence, measuring and jotting notes on clipboards. They weren't city workers, and he hadn't hired anyone. He stormed outside. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" The men looked up, startled. One, wearing a polo embroidered with the HOA logo, managed a nervous smile. "Just conducting a routine property assessment for HOA compliance, sir." "You're trespassing," Jackson snapped. "Get off my land before I call the sheriff." They left in a hurry, but Jackson knew this wasn't over. Margaret wasn't the type to fold that easily. 2 days later, a bright yellow notice of violation was nailed to his fence. Failure to comply with HOA regulations will result in escalating fines. A lien may be placed on your property if violations are not corrected. Adieu? Jackson's hands clenched into fists. This was getting dirty. Before he could process it, his phone buzzed, an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Mr. Callahan, this is Margaret Evans. I see you removed our notice. That was a legally posted warning. You nailed it to my damn fence, Jackson growled. That's vandalism. Oh, let's not be dramatic. You still have time to comply. Lady, set foot on my property again, and I'm calling the cops. You'll find that ignoring this won't make it go away. We'll see. Jackson snapped and hung up. But Margaret wasn't done. That weekend, while Jackson was in town grabbing supplies, his phone pinged with an alert from his security cameras. He opened the feed and nearly threw his phone across the truck. A team of landscapers was cutting down the bushes along his fence. He tore back home, tires spitting gravel, but by the time he arrived, the damage was done. Who the hell told you to do this? He shouted. The foreman, a stocky guy with a clipboard, shrugged. HOA orders. Said the bushes violated community landscaping codes. Jackson could barely see straight through his fury. This is private property. You've got 2 minutes to leave before I call the sheriff. The workers didn't need telling twice. That night, Jackson made 3 calls. 1 to his lawyer, 1 to the sheriff's department to report criminal trespassing, and 1 to a fencing company, because if the HOA want to play dirty, so could he. By morning, contractors were already installing a 10-foot steel-reinforced privacy fence around his entire property. Margaret Evans, however, wasn't giving up that easily. 3 days later, she arrived at his gate, with 2 HOA board members and this time police officers in tow. Afternoon, officers, Jackson greeted them coolly. What seems to be the problem? Mr. Callahan, we got a call about unauthorized structures and zoning violations, one officer explained. Let me guess, her call. Jackson gestured to Margaret. She stepped forward smug. This fence is an eyesore and violates our community standards. I'm not in your community, Jackson shot back. This fence lowers property values. Unless you've got a court order, you're wasting your time. The officer flipped through paperwork Margaret handed over, but looked unconvinced. Do you have proof your property isn't under HOA jurisdiction? Jackson pulled a thick folder from a metal lockbox. Right here. The officer skimmed the documents, property deeds, surveys, a legal statement from his lawyer. Finally, he shut the folder. Ma'am, this land is outside HOA authority. Margaret's face turned scarlet. This isn't fair. Not my problem, the officer muttered. Margaret stormed off, but Jackson knew this wasn't over. It wasn't. But this time, Jackson went on the offensive. His lawyer filed a trespassing complaint, served the HOA with a cease and desist letter, and took the matter public. At a local town hall meeting, Jackson laid out the HOA's tactics, backed by documents, photos, and even security footage. To his surprise, he wasn't the only one. He fined me for parking my RV on my own land, one man shouted. She made us repaint our house because she didn't like the color, a woman added. The tide turned. When Margaret Evans next appeared in court, the judge wasted no time. The lien was dismissed. The HOA's overreach was exposed. Margaret was slapped with a hefty fine. The final nail? A full audit of HOA funds revealed years of misuse. Margaret resigned in disgrace, her house quietly listed for sale. Jackson, meanwhile, hosted a barbecue, his land, his rules. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now shared beers and swapped stories. For the first time in a long time, Jackson Callahan smiled. His land was safe, and no one was ever going to mess with it again.